Today is another question of Jesus. Last week we had the first one by Sheena. And today is a rather long question as well. It's a difficult topic, and obviously I will be giving you the fruits of my meditation on this passage. But again, I might not say everything perfectly. I might not have it completely right, but I guess as a congregation we're all trying to understand God's word further, and I trust you will also have this, share with me in this task of really grasping what it's all about. But thanks, Ian, for also bringing up the situation in the Middle East, because I think we clearly see examples of and the teaching of Jesus resound in our particular context. So that is the question for today. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? Have you ever noticed that in a church building, there are a lot of beams or planks? Or have you ever noticed that beams and pieces of wood generally are usually structurally essential to most types of building? If you're not convinced, just look up, and I'm pretty sure you will notice a few beams. I find it great that in this church building we have kept apparent or visible the actual structure of the woodwork, wooden frame that also keeps, that makes Maswell Park Church building what it is really. I think it would be quite different without a roof. And also the walls wouldn't really stand either, because they kind of need that kind of structure to hold them together. Does anyone recognize this building? Notre Dame. I guess the big bonfire on the roof gave you a clue, right? Have any of you already been to Notre Dame de Paris? Yeah? You've been in it as well? Yeah? Okay. Well, you're more French than I am, because I've never been inside. Or maybe I was really young and a baby, I can't remember, so sadly. But I guess you've been before it burned. Hopefully not whilst it was burning. Yes, in 2019, the roof of Notre Dame de Paris just went up in smoke, or a big fire. And the wooden frame of Notre Dame de Paris, I'm going to say Notre Dame de Paris because I'm confused, I'm going to say the proper way. Notre Dame de Paris was more than 800 years old. A very old wooden structure, and it was still standing until then. It was called the forest because it was such a complex structure. And the timber used for the building was sourced from what used to be the primitive forest in France. So forests that were never exploited by men. And nowadays you wouldn't find such forests in France anymore. And some of the oak trees that were used for the roof were more than 500 years old when they were cut. So the roof was built in the 13th century, but some of the trees were as old as, the 7th century. And after the fire, it was decided that the roof of Notre Dame was going to be rebuilt identically to the old roof, using only the tools that were available in the 13th century to build it. And so they used the same traditional techniques to work the timbers, and they used more than 1,300 oak trees, about a century old and a bit more, that's the oldest you can find in France, to rebuild the wooden structure of Notre Dame. But in order to rebuild it identically, we need drawings and plans, right? We need the drawings of what it used to be. And it turned out that only 5 years before the fire, so you see some of the details here of how complex it was. And it turns out that 5 years before the fire, 2 architects had taken upon themselves the task of drawing by hand every single piece of wood that were in the church, and it's about 1,800 pieces of wood making the whole frame. And these were the only documents available, and so it's quite astonishing that 5 years before, 2 architects actually thought, oh, it'd be good to draw what this forest actually looked like. And it had never been done in 800 years, at least not in a very complete manner. So that ended up being quite a good thing, better late than never. And so it is through the careful examination of all the pieces that it is nowadays possible to actually rebuild it as it was. So these 2 architects have done well to examine every beam that were part of the building. There you go, some drawings. Let us read the passage for today. Otherwise I'll keep talking about other stuff. So I read in Matthew 7, verse 1 to 5. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way as you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. First of all, it is quite obvious that Jesus is here really focused on perception, on the way of perceiving things. And it's not only that Jesus is concerned about the things perceived, but he is mainly concerned about the source of perception, or what represents the source of all perceptions, the eyes. It is not only what is seen that is at stake, but the eye that sees things. And the eyes have got this remarkable feature that in seeing others' eyes, other people's eyes, they see that by which they see, as well as that by which they are seen to others. So it's a really remarkable feature. And in the text, it was quite obvious to the disciples when they wrote down the Gospels that Jesus did not only mean the physical or biological eyes, but the eyes represented the source of perception that opens us to others and the world, the eyes through which we see the world. And hence why in this passage the eyes are closely connected to judgment and also the measure of judgment. There's a confirmation here in another text that the eyes are more than sight. In Luke chapter 11, verse 33 to 36, which I'm going to read. No one lights a lamp and puts it in a place where it will be hidden or under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand so that those who come in may see the light. Your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eyes are healthy, your whole body also is full of light. But when they are unhealthy, your body also is full of darkness. See to it, then, that the light within you is not darkness. Therefore, if your whole body is full of light, and no part of it dark, It will be just as full of light as when a lamp shines its light on you. The eye is the lamp of your body. Means not only that they shed light on what is outside of us, but more importantly, they tell something about ourselves. What we see always says something about the eyes that sees it. Now Jesus brings this rather new teaching that our eyes, the source from which we see things, will also determine the way in which we will be seen in the future. For in the same way as you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And there is here, in the teaching of Jesus, a call to a complete conversion of our perception. Second part. Conversion initially means turning back or turning around, turning something upside down or like front to back. And that is in this question. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the beam in your own eye? So here Jesus tells us to get our priorities right when it comes to perception. We cannot see well until we see ourselves. If we are blind, if our eyes are in darkness, we can judge all things, measure all things, but we will never see as we should see. And Luke, in his gospel, adds a parable in between, in the same teaching, and he says, "Can a blind man lead a blind man? Will they not both fall in the pit?" So in the text, he originally uses two different words. Becoming aware of myself must precede the act of seeing others. All judgments and all measures must go through us first. And that is the reversal that Jesus brings about in his teaching. And in some way, it reminded me about the impartiality of God. Difficult word for me. God is so impartial that, to some extent, in this text, he also tells us that he doesn't even take party for himself, because he really points the measure of his own judgment and points it towards us. He goes as far as saying that each of us will set the measure of our own judgment, and I find that quite strong in the end, that we are also sort of involved in that process so much. We are so responsibilized, given a responsibility that's above all that we've heard before. And it is in these radical words that in the same way as you judge others, you will be judged. And the Son testifies in his body that God has already come to judge the world, and his judgment rests on Jesus Christ on the cross. It is all there. And now this judgment has been revealed to us, and we are the ones who stand before the cross. And the way we look at the cross now is the measure that we set for ourselves and for our own judgment on the last day. Basically, to you will be done according to what you have done to others. And becoming aware of the cross in this way is the conversion that Jesus Christ has come to bring about. Jesus shows us that this is the way that leads us out of hypocrisy. Our conversion comes with realizing that our perception of the world is always distorted as long as we don't pay first attention to the way we see others in this world. And it is only through the cross that we can come to truly see ourselves as we are. But to be gazed upon and to accept that light may be shed on us is to accept that the beam in our own eye be made visible to us. And yes, it is at the cross that we can come to see this beam in our own eye. Because at the cross, and perhaps for the first time, we realize that it is us who are being seen first. And not only are we being seen by Christ, but this man was also the Holy One of God, the one who really had no beam in his own eye. And his judgment is true. And so that call to a conversion of our perception is truly a unique position that we are called to in this world. It is really unique what the cross does in our lives. And Jesus' teaching only can truly set us free from our own hypocrisy and our blindness even to this beam that was in our own eye. Well, that is now that we come to our third point, a point of caution for us. Because that is also maybe where starts a risk if we go by the name of Christian and if we are called Christian. Maybe a risk that a double hypocrisy might appear, hence why the caution sign. Firstly, there is always this first hypocrisy that we still remain prone to. We still see the world with our eyes, and we're still in this world, and sometimes we can forget to look at our own judgments on things and kind of go back in our old way of seeing things. But secondly, I think there is a double hypocrisy, a risk of double hypocrisy that comes along, which we have to be careful about. Which also, I think, comes with the immense responsibility we're given, and that we realize in front of the cross. We can run the risk of thinking that because we have been freed from hypocrisy and we have known Jesus and we have seen what he has done at the cross, we have this risk of maybe stepping above others and think we are now more able, more right in our judgment, and maybe we can think that our judgment is better than others because we know, because we have known. And that is a risk. In fact, we can use our status of Christian as a posture of authority for judgment. And I think that's when we can actually fall on the other side of hypocrisy. And that is why we should be doubly cautious when there is a doubly high risk of hypocrisy. And I think this is where it's sound to be reminded of how Jesus even starts his teaching there. He starts it saying, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged." And I think that's the first opening line that really sets the bar for us, and also how critical this teaching is to be received properly, or in a way that really makes us aware of the importance and the risks that are involved, entailed there. But then, obviously this question came up to my mind, and I was like, but are there actually nothing to be judged in this world? I think to some extent, yes, there will be things to judge, even judging a bad or a good action. And we all have to then put some form of judgment in the things we see and the things we do. Certainly. But here we must be reminded that every time we judge a matter or an action, we must also remember that we ourselves are judging ourselves first in our own judgment. I must remember that I am always judging myself first, as well as I am the one setting the measure for my own judgment before God. And that is where our call to this greater responsibility is. And again, we can read this: with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. So let us come to a close. It remains true, and the truth is, churches are made of beams, for as long as we're here. I don't know how the roof is going to stand in heaven, but we cannot help it, and I think it is structural to it. But the question is, are we aware of them being there? And Jesus points it out to us. You know, if there were no beams in the church, I would not be part of it. But not because I would fear the roof falling on me, but because I am one of those beams making the church. And the church is not a shop window where everything is already perfect and holy, at least not every day. Or not every day is the church like a window to heaven. This is the place where we are shaped and transformed, and we get to see the beams. But again, the beams, we see them in us, and in others we might just see the specks of sawdust. But then, really, that's a place where we are confronted to ourselves. But once again, we must remember that what we see always tells something about us. And where the church is truly at work through Christ is when it helps people like me and you in our conversion from judging what is outside from us to judging what is inside of us first, and start from there. And in coming into the church, I come to learn that I must mind my head. And that also the clearance is often lower than I think. Yes. The church is the place where we learn that our judgments and perceptions must first go through us, be applied on us. And so that's a place where we are really summoned. It is really all of us that's engaged into it. And that's also the only way out of hypocrisy, because that's the place where we'll fully become ourselves until Christ returns. It is the life we have lived and the measure we have used that becomes the measure of our lives before God. Hence why Jesus said to the crowd and his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." Amen.